Hey, Clay Allison from Wicked Edge here again, and we're continuing our knife preparation for our trip that's coming up to the Continental Divide Trail, where we're going to do a 100-mile stretch. And I've got this Falkneven F1 that I'm planning on carrying, and I've put on an edge that I like and I think is going to be good, but I want to continue to test it because I'm going to be out there for just 10 days with just this knife, and I want to make sure that the edge I've put on is going to hold up to everything that's going to be required of it. So here we are today up above the Santa Fe ski area, just inside the wilderness at about 11,000 feet, and this is an area where a lot of people camp, and so there's not a lot of firewood available. So we've scrounged around for what we could find and come up with this pile of stuff that I'm going to process through and try and turn into some life-saving firewood. So I've got this knife, and I'm going to grab a baton and I'm going to bash through a lot of this stuff. I'm going to shave little bits of wood off to get to the dry cores so I can start a fire, and we'll see how this knife holds up. But it's going to go through a lot of work today, and when I'm done, I'll take it back down to the shop and we'll put it through the microscope and the sharpness tester, and again we'll see what kind of damage has happened to the edge and how the retention of the edge has gone, and we can actually measure that quantitatively and make a determination if this edge really is suitable for the kind of thing I'm planning for it. So we're going to pause for a little bit while I get to work on this pile of wood, and we'll come back after I've done some of it, and we'll show some of the cutting tasks that the knife is going to be subjected to. Okay, picking up from where we left off before, I've managed to process a good chunk of this wood. I created myself a really nice baton here. I've shaved the handle down here so it's nice and comfortable to hold. Plus I've created a nice pile of shavings that I'll use in my fire later. And I found this wood here, which if you can look inside, you'll see it's a little bit yellow. It's not a true fat wood, but it is going to burn really well compared to standard wood. It's got a decent amount of sap content left over from it. This is real old stuff, but it'll help us a lot with our fire because the rest of the wood around here is pretty wet and pretty low quality. So if we can get into the insides of these pieces, like I'm doing by batoning through it and splitting it, and I think we're going to be in good shape. So this is some of the work that this knife has been doing already, and it's pretty hard work. But it's allowing me to split right through this stuff. And here's one little tip. I could keep pounding all the way through, but why should I subject my knife to that when I've created enough of a break there that I can just pry it apart instead of just keep smashing through on the knife. So again, now I've got right to the heart of this stuff, which is going to be fantastic for building fire. I'll break a little bit more of this stuff off, and I'll shave some more pieces down into here, and we'll be able to use these in building our fire. Alright, so you can see I've continued just peeling off a whole bunch of wood for this, and this is obviously more than I would need for one night's fire. In fact, probably this is 3 nights worth of firework, but I'm trying to accelerate this in order to make sure I really put this knife through the test before I take off this weekend. And this is hard work on a knife. There's a lot of, wood fiber in general is really tough on blades, and there's also a ton of lateral pressure on the edge, which is really what dulls a knife more than anything. So, you can deform an edge by lateral pressure or blunt pressure, kind of straight on. So batoning and carving like this, 2 of the worst things you can do to dull a knife. And then of course the last thing you can do is abrade it, which, looking around at this wood, if you look around here closely, most of it's covered in dirt. So there's a lot of sand and dirt particles as I'm cutting through this stuff, and that's certainly going to abrade my edge and round it. So this is tough stuff here that I'm doing. But so far the knife is holding up really well, and I'm quite pleased with the edge I've put on it and chosen for it. And of course it's a good testament to a really nice high quality knife also. Okay, so we're wrapped up here. You can see I've processed through all this wood, and I've made a wonderful big pile of shavings here. Plus I've also managed to split out a ton of small pieces for kindling, and this is all out of that kind of fat piney wood. Like I said, it's got more sap in it than regular deadened down, but it's not true fat pine. But it'll burn great, especially since I've gotten to the dry part of it. And the knife held up wonderfully. I did a lot of carving, made shavings. I did a ton of splitting and batoning, as you can see, and it really held up through all those things. And we're going to try. I really doubt this is going to work, but if we come in close, I'm going to see if I can still shave with this knife a little bit. So let's try and get in here close and see what we're getting. Yeah, this is it's barely shaving. It's getting a few hairs here and there, and that's, you know, that's not surprising. After all that sand, all that carving and batoning, you know, it really shouldn't be shaving. I mean, I would have been completely shocked. So it's still getting a little bit of hair, but not much. And I feel like between the couple outings I've had plus today, I've really done about 10 days worth of wood processing. So I feel like, yeah, this knife is holding up great. One last test is just to take it back to the shop, put it under the microscope, and put it through the sharpness tester, and just see kind of quantitatively what has become of the edge. But so far, very pleased with the style of knife, style of edge, and the finish I put on it, which is a 1000 grit finish, and I did a little bit of stropping with the 14 micron strops at 2 degrees lower than the sharpening angle. So that's it for now, and we'll pick it back up in the studio. Thanks for watching. We're back at the shop now, and I brought in the Falcon Even that I had out in the field earlier today, and had done pretty fair amount of damage to it, and all the batoning and all the carving that I'd done. What had happened was that as I was carving with my right hand, I was putting a lot of lateral pressure on this side of the blade, and so what it did is it forced kind of a lip of metal to curl up this way, which you could feel, you know, if you run your fingernail up here like a burr. And I've taken some really nice microscopic photographs that show, you know, the little bit of chips and things that happen to the edge. Plus I took a couple from straight down onto the blade, which shows, you know, how fat the actual edge had gotten throughout all that abuse. So, but even with all that abuse, it was still working great, and I believe we're going to just kind of try this out now without having sharpened it yet. Yeah, I mean, after all that, it's still, you know, it's snagging a little bit where there's chips, but it's definitely, you know, cutting right through this paper. And that's, you know, it's not amazing, but for the amount of abuse that this knife has taken, that's pretty impressive. And, you know, we simulated about 10 days of preparing for a campfire every night, carving and batoning and all kinds of wood prep to get ready for our fires. So if it can still do that to paper after 10 days simulated, I feel really confident that the edge I'm going to put on here to touch it back up is going to really last for my trip. So to touch it back up, I'm just going to throw it in the clamp like we had it before, lock it in place. The angle's already set, and I'm just going to pick up my 800 grit stones, and I'm going to make some passes. And then I'll flip them over to my 1000 grit, and I'll just continue the process here. I'm not timing exactly how long this is taking me, but I don't think it's taking all that long. And just to test the edge of my thumbnail, it's already back to screaming sharp, which is what we would expect because all the geometry is lined back up. So you should just be able to throw it in the clamp, set the angle to where you were last time, make a few strokes, and be back in great shape. I'm going to clean the edge off a little bit now, and then I'm going to lower the angle by 2 degrees, and I'm going to do a tiny bit of stropping just to finish out the edge and get it where I want it for this trip. Now when I strop, here's a tip, well, a couple tips really. I like to use a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and I spray it on my strops just lightly like that, just enough to moisten it. And then I'm going to lower the angle by 2 degrees. And that's important because the leather is pliable and it'll kind of curve up around the edge. So if I was stropping at the same angle I've been sharpening at, I'd actually end up rounding over the edge a little bit and not being quite as crisp there at the very edge as I want. So I've lowered it 2 degrees, and this is just real light, easy pressure. And that, I believe, is going to be just a great touch-up. So that was really quick and easy, almost no fuss. And I'm using our commercial series sharpener, but what I did just now would work in any of our models. So, you know, the touch-ups, the functionality is all just the same. And then I'm going to test just a little bit to see if it's, oh yeah. And if you come in close, I mean, that's how fast it restored. Crazy shaving sharp. So that's fantastic. I'm really pleased with that result, and I think this knife is ready to hit the wilderness with me in a couple of days. So thanks for watching through this whole series, and check in with us next time on our next project.